Hey folks, this week I'm talking with Nicholas Adams about OpenRiak, not React, OpenRiak. That's the big database project. It scales, it replicates, it can do a lot of stuff very, very quickly. It's NoSQL, just don't ask it to fuzzy match. That's real slow. It's a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. This is Floss Weekly, episode 861, recorded on Monday, January the 20th. Big databases with OpenRiak. Hey folks, it's time for Floss Weekly. That's the show about free, Libre, and open source software. I am your host, Jonathan Bennett, and today we have something sort of different. It's a database, and it's an Erlang. I think it's an Erlang-based project. We're recording at a bit of an oddball time because our guest is literally on the other side of the world from me, but that's okay. That's one of the things we like to do here. We have the flexibility to do that. And so without further ado, today we're talking with Nicholas Adams about OpenRiak. That's R-I-A-K, not any other thing that sounds like Riak. I imagine they have some confusion around that. Let's find out. So first off, welcome to the show, Nicholas. It's good to have you here.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to learn more about this project and sort of the ecosystem around it. I was doing a little bit of prep for this and looking into it, and well, first off, we're talking about a database program, right? And it is written in Erlang.
Yes, it is indeed written in Erlang,
Okay, and
and we are a database.
it's OpenRiak, and there was a
Yes.
Riak before there was OpenRiak, which is all that fact in and of itself seems to tell an interesting story. What's the background there?
Okay. So the background behind the transition, many, many moons ago, I believe it was 2009, a company in the US, a venture startup called Basho, created a database product called Riak.
Mhm.
Started off with a key value store, hence the NoSQL basis.
Mhm.
And that became incredibly popular within the US. It grew to a scale where Apple used it for iMessages. League of Legends ran it, major insurance companies, major HR companies, government projects, space exploration projects, all different kinds of really famous companies. Uber was a great early user of Riak. That's the kind of scale it grew to. It was a really exciting database product.
Right.
And then in 2017, there was a botched buyout as the venture capitalists wanted to get their money back a little bit earlier than they should have done from this company that was growing well. And things went wrong, and Basho folded. Basically,
Mm.
there was a bankruptcy, and the world's media was very happy to say Basho is dead, therefore Riak is dead, therefore the end of Riak, etc.
Mm.
Which was a very sad moment, but also grossly incorrect, as soon as Basho went bankrupt, one of the largest users on the planet, um, uh, can I give their name? I think I can. Bet365, a British company for online betting, the
Mhm.
world's largest online betting company. They were kind enough to buy the IP, just the IP, not the company, and make it all the code open source.
Oh, really? Wow. I
So,
That's
okay.
that's a pretty rare thing. I don't know that I could name another outside company. So like I know of big companies that have made their code base open source. One of the obvious examples there is, Netscape Navigator became Mozilla Firefox.
Mhm.
But I don't know that I could name another company where an IP was bought just to make it open source. Like that's got to be pretty unique in this world that we work in.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is as Riak at the time was such a well-used database worldwide,
Hmm.
and there was nothing like it. I mean, Uber, for example, they said, "Oh, Basho is dead. We need to move to something very quickly. Move to Postgres." And then at the scale that Uber operates, they ran into all kinds of issues very, very quickly because Postgres is a great database within a certain sphere, but I'm sorry, but it just doesn't scale as well as Riak does because this is designed to be a massively scalable database.
Right, right, right.
So, lots of companies ran into things like that. Bet365 realized there's nothing they could replace it with. So they bought the IP to make sure the project different didn't die, and they knew that there are lots of people still around the world who are using it.
Mhm.
So they made the code open source, and under Bet365 stewardship, we made 40 something releases of Riak AV. But we were still cursed with the world's media logged everywhere. If you search for Riak, it said, yes, Riak died in 2017. And after a while, we got somewhat annoyed with this. And some of the biggest contributors towards the project, my company included, came together under the Erlang Ecosystems Foundation, which is an NPO based in the US.
Mhm.
And we basically created OpenRiak. The concept being that if we have a mild change of name, open suggests it's open source and it's new and exciting, but
And
it still has
therefore,
the React part in there to say, this is where we came from.
and it also gives people
And
something to search for on the internet that does not return. It's a dead project.
yes, which annoyed the hell out of us, sorry, annoyed us all the time because every time, yes, I do React, but React died. No, it doesn't. It's still here. It still works. It runs the technology you probably use today and just didn't realize.
Yeah. So it was closed source before the buyout.
So before the buyouts, it opened a freemium model. So
Mm.
there was essentially the open source model, which would allow you to use everything except for a couple of key features. For example, multi-data center replication was an enterprise only feature. And of course, if you're a big company, you want to be able to have your data located geo-separated. So if one data center goes down, it's hit by a tornado, there's a power cut, whatever, you can just switch to the other one. But also is you can do bidirectional and multi-directional replication. You can then create your own CDN worldwide. So maybe have a data center in the US, a data center in Europe, and a data center in Asia.
Mhm.
And then whichever one your user hits, they'll hit the one closest to you. But anybody else anywhere else can retrieve their data from another location.
Yeah. Now I want to dig into that too because there's some really interesting questions about what there's sort of a pick any two out of three with databases. I want to get into that. But first off, what is your background with this? Were you involved with Riak back when it was part of Basho, or are you strictly a post open source developer?
Oh, I sit on both sides of that fence. So yes, back in the day, Basho decided to outsource Asia Pacific support to the company that I co-founded.
Oh, okay.
So I trained up as a Basho Client Services Engineer, or CSE as they were called back then. And if you had one of the enterprise packages with Riak, that then meant that you gained access to either business hours or 24/7, 365 support. So if you had a critical issue, you could basically open a ticket in Zendesk and then somebody would jump on your ticket and say, yep, this is why you're having issues. This is how we recommend you fix it. Or give us more logs and data so we can analyze your problem and try and replicate it and then
Mhm.
tell you how to fix it.
Yeah. So you were involved at that level then, and then like how involved have you been through each step of this process?
So when Basho went under, we realized that basically Basho went under, which cost them all their US engineers, all the European engineers, and Asia Pacific was basically us. We're a separate company, so we didn't go bankrupt
Hmm.
as we had other revenue streams. So we realized Riak is a huge product that's not going to go away. Even if Basho goes under, people are going to keep using it because it just works. So we rehired some of their engineers from the US and Europe and basically reset up shop because we
Oh.
had the previous experience of working with all the customers as 24/7 support. Europe has an issue that runs into the night. Then it goes through the US and then continues around, and we take over at the crack of dawn when it's 9 o'clock in the morning here. So we were just able to go to all the customers we knew and say, "Hi, we're still here. Would you like support?" And quite a few of them said, "Yeah, support,
Yes.
great. We need support because the main support's gone." And yeah, essentially, our company went from doing 24/7, 365 support just from Asia to doing it globally.
Hmm.
And we've continued providing enterprise grade support ever since. Although the software for OpenRiak, since we transitioned to OpenRiak, is completely open source. So even without our support, you get all the features, everything. We're under an Apache 2 license, which
Okay.
means it's truly free. And as the whole thing is registered under the Erlang Ecosystems Foundation, the NPO, then again, it's completely open source. We're not going under any, like Minio the other day, where they say, yeah, we're open source, except when the venture capitalists decide we want to close the source and make it a pay to use product, and you're all in trouble now. That's not going to happen here because we're under an NPO.
Right. So you said something interesting there. You're Apache 2, which means that you're truly, how did you put it? Truly free, truly open source.
Yeah, we're truly open source. You're free to take our source code and do whatever you want to it, but please don't do nasty stuff.
Yes, I've been involved in those conversations too. Yes, we make X, Y, or Z. Please don't break the law with our stuff. Yeah, that's uh, is Apache 2, and I don't remember off the top of my head. Is Apache 2? Does it have copyleft? Does it have some restriction that you've got to give back your changes, or is it one of what they call the permissive licenses? I should know this off the top of my head too.
Top of my head, I believe it's a permissive license where you're free to do whatever you want, but don't quote me on that, as they say, as that's just the best of my recall, I'm afraid.
Yes, I think that's accurate. Okay, so you guys were in this situation, and things became fully open source, and you discovered that people still like to be able to call a company for support, even though it's an open source project. Is that
Yeah,
how long has OpenRiak sort of existed since this rebrand?
right. The rebrand happened in October 2024.
Okay. Okay. So
So I got to announce it publicly at Codebeam Europe, which was in Berlin at the time.
about it getting close to a year and a half then that it's been running under the new name. How's that gone? Have you found a renewed interest as a result of it?
Yes, there's definitely been renewed interest since we did the rebrand. To give you an example, there was a Riak group on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
which was essentially a ghost town, and that had 600 members who never seemed to really react to anything that anybody posted there. The odd person did, but not that many. And then we thought, well, we're rebranding, so I created the OpenRiak group on LinkedIn, and we have over 100 members now. And every time, we'll be doing stuff, and people occasionally pop up, and there'll be new members, or maybe in one of the things, such as one of the Slack channels, people will suddenly pop up brand new and say, yeah, I used to use Riak when I worked for company XYZ,
Hmm.
and it was a great product. And I'm seeing it appearing again as OpenRiak, and I'm really interested. I want to use it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay, I have some technical questions then. Some of these I know the answer to, some of them I don't. I leave everybody
I'll do my
guessing how much
best.
I actually know the answers. When we talk about NoSQL, what is
Yes.
NoSQL?
Um, oh, this is the classic SQL, NoSQL database debate, rather. If you imagine SQL as essentially a glorified Excel sheet,
Okay.
think about it. You've got in your worksheet, you have multiple sheets, each of which is a table. And if you go back into the old days, you could actually connect an Excel spreadsheet as an ODBC driver for
Hmm.
SQL back in Windows, which is one of the ways I actually used to practice my SQL. Is I'd send things in the code, I'd check how it changed my worksheet, and that would be, oh yeah, so that's how that works. And if I got it horribly wrong, I could just go back into Excel and edit it back how it should be.
I'm pretty
So
sure you can.
that's
I'm pretty sure you can still do that with Google Sheets. By the way, there are ways to address that as if it's a SQL database. It's a cursed thing to do, but you can do it.
Yes, it's a great learning tool, but should not really be used in production unless you really, really, really have to for some obscure reason.
Yes.
So if you imagine SQL is essentially a worksheet or workbook, NoSQL is more like a file system.
Hmm.
So in the world of React KV or OpenRiak KV, depending on which period you look at, then we essentially have bucket types. We have buckets, keys, and then values. And that would be, for example, bucket type. If you're using a Windows file system, as some of your users may do, then that would be, for example, C or D would be an option. Essentially, it gives you multiple levels of naming you can use.
Mhm.
For example, users folder, whatever, call it whatever you want. Bucket would just be another folder name. Key would be the name of whatever you're sticking in there, and value would be the thing. So that could be, for example, I don't know, users. emails, and then you have the user ID of 1234, and then the value would be my email at mydomain.com.
Mhm.
Or it could be, again, users, this time photos, or I don't know, Gravatar or whatever. Then again, user ID is your key, and then it could be a JPEG or a GIF or maybe even some kind of movie file
Mhm.
as your value, which is why this is very flexible, as you can essentially stick anything you want in anywhere and it will generally just accept it.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Now, when we talk about databases, particularly like high availability, big scale databases, there's a thing called the CAP theorem, right? And that talks about
Yes.
you can only have two of these three things. And I can't remember. I know basically what this is, but I don't remember what CAP actually stands for. It's what concurrency. Um,
Oh, very good. Well, consistency, availability, and then P for network partition.
that's right. Partition tolerance. Okay. So
Yep.
and the idea is you can only have two of these three things. You got to pick two. What
Yes.
two has OpenRiak picked?
So OpenRiak decided to pick availability and network partition as priority, but we also run eventual consistency in the background.
Mhm.
So we're kind of two and a half because it's impossible to get three unless you do some severe black magic.
Yeah. So essentially, what you're saying is a record may go in on this physical server, and then around the world, someone may ping a different physical server, and it may not be updated yet, but both of those servers are going to be up and online.
Yes, so no matter what happens, you should be able to read and write. Although it's possible that if you do a read at, well, within a quarter of a millisecond of somebody writing stuff, then you may not be able to read the most up-to-date version.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, interesting. So, and then what does the scaling of OpenRiak look like? Like how big do these systems get? I assume they run on, and I think we covered this a bit already, but like you run them on multiple discrete servers. We're not just talking about one really big box.
Yes. So OpenRiak is generally designed to be both horizontal and vertically scalable. So you can run it on a handful of really big boxes,
Mhm.
or you can run it on a bunch of tiny boxes. And to give you an idea of scale, I run a cluster, which is 5 nodes here, on Raspberry Pis, which I use to do my crypto taxes.
Mm, that makes sense.
I just store ridiculous amounts of essentially key value of this is the time, this is the date, this is the currency, and this is what it was worth in my currency at the time. I
Mhm.
just store huge amounts of that in this. And that's, really small scale. Going up to big scale, you have people. So one of our customers back in the day, they used to sync 14 petabytes of data around their system.
My
They
goodness.
had multiple clusters of 60 nodes back then. Another user who is quite concurrent, they sync, well, what do they do? They do 10 billion keys across an entire country every 7 minutes.
How does OpenReact do that? Like is there some sort of black magic so that you don't have to push the entire database across the internet?
Um, yes, the fine details of the replication engine are quite amazing. And if I try to go into this in great detail, one of the people who wrote the vast majority of it would probably kill me, as I know I'll get it wrong. So I'll try to simplify a bit. And basically, we'll say, let's say that if you hash this side and you hash this side, so I've got two clusters. This one says I have these hashes. This
Mhm.
side has I have these hashes. You compare the hashes and then see what difference is. And you sync across what's missing. Um, Essentially, and I'm simplifying horribly and probably getting things wrong. Imagine that in a Merkle tree where you have different layers of hashes going all the way up.
Mhm.
And then it finds out where the difference is and then just goes down that little bit till it finds what's different in there, rather than having to do all of cluster A and all of cluster B in one shot.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. It's almost a database on the blockchain, sort of.
It is essentially, yeah, given the way that Riak is distributed within itself and has multiple copies, and the copies have to be consistent with each other, it's essentially a private blockchain, but we just don't sign the blocks.
Mm-hmm. And you don't call it a blockchain because people will get the
No,
wrong
we don't.
idea.
This existed before blockchain was a big thing.
Yes.
I know the blockchain also came into existence around about the same time, but this is where this is properly a database and doesn't need to have sequential things bolted on the end every time.
Yes, yes. I have annoyed many people, and I enjoy it thoroughly, by simply saying that blockchain has already had its killer use case, and that was Git.
Oh, I never thought of that, but yeah, that does actually make sense to me.
Yes, yes. You're one of the ones that get it. I like that. Okay, now this sort of half consistency metric. What does that mean for writing applications that use OpenRiak? That's got to be sort of a challenge that you don't always know that you're going to get up to date data.
Well, that's a mixed bag. Well, the simplest way to do it is you can tune this. So one of our customers who's a European bank, what they do is they have a large number of nodes in each cluster or a large number of servers in each cluster.
Mhm.
And normally OpenRiak has a default value of keeping 3 copies of your data. Now, what they've done is they've cranked that number up quite a bit higher. So um, they'll then run the query, and instead of just having one node reply and say, yeah, this is what I think the answer is, but somebody else might have a newer version, they then have the majority of their nodes reply. And then it's just a consistency thing of, well, nodes 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7 say it's value A, and node 2 and 3 say it's value B. Oh, in that case, probably it's value A because they're more consistent and they have the newer timestamp. It's actually done with dotted version vectors in the background, but we'll just say timestamp for simplicity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Is that one of those deals where if the timestamp um, is inverted, you know you have data corruption? So like if the newer timestamp has the older data, is that a sign that something has gone really bad wrong?
It could just be a sign of an update to the same value.
Mm.
That does happen in the real world. Um, sorry, I sounded completely pastoralizing when I said that. That wasn't intentional at all. Um, but yeah, I have seen things where people will update something with the same value just to get that little push in the system to make sure something appears slightly higher up the stack. I mean, everybody's seen this in things where you have a forum and somebody says bump
Mm.
just to push it back to the top. Essentially, that does happen in databases in production where you need to nudge things back to the top of the queue.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. The database bump. Um, all right. So let's say um, well, let me ask this: what are the sorts of problems that people are solving by using OpenRiak? Like, what industries do you see this being used in? You mentioned banking. Is there like sort of a killer use case that you know of that you would tell me? If you're in this industry, if this is the thing you're trying to do, OpenRiak is the tool.
Um, OpenRiak is great where you have, well, massive amounts of data. Um, and you don't have, well, you can do what I'm going to call it a fuzzy search. Fuzzy search is something OpenRiak is very bad at. I'm going to reverse your question for a second and explain why in a sec. Fuzzy searches are your standard ones that you'd love to do in SQL. For example, select star from table where da 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 equals star,
Mm-hmm.
or essentially like find me a city in the US with the letter A in it, and the A can be anywhere in the word.
Right.
OpenRiak finds that an absolute nightmare to do, as everything is stored under keys and values, and the only way it can check that is read every single key and a value and then try and work things out. And it's horrible and nasty, and you should never ever try and do that in OpenRiak unless you want to waste time and system resources. If you want to do that, use SQL. It's a much better tool for this. Use the right tools for the job.
Yes.
Um, OpenRiak, on the other hand, is actually really, really fast if you don't do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you write save your data how you plan to query it, then it's blindingly fast. Because instead of having to trawl through a big table like you would in SQL, instead it just goes there, grabs your record, and brings it straight back to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a straight go get something that's a one-to-one pairing from query to results, then OpenRiak will outpace pretty much anything. Well, I'm going to be brave and say anything on the planet. I may be wrong on that, but as far as I know, it does. So yes, it gives you incredibly fast data retrieval, even when you come into OpenRiak. So let's say you've got a node with a cluster with 5 nodes,
Mhm.
and you come in on. Oh, sorry, I'm going wrong way. Yes, there we go. Cluster with 5 nodes. You come in and you hit this one, and this one doesn't have your data. It will then look in what it's called the ring, which is basically a list of where all data stored, and says, "Oh, okay, this node, and this node have the data you're looking for. So I'll send a query to all 3 of those, and whichever node replies back first will come back to this one, and then that reply back to you."
Yeah,
So
interesting.
it
So,
does give you really fast throughput. And again, the massive scalability, horizontal scalability as well. Once you start to run low in space on OpenRiak, what do? Well, you just add another box. And then you add another box. And that's it. And everything else syncs magically. And you can do that in real time under production load, unless you've really, really, really overstressed it before you did that.
oh, so it can do sort of terrible analogy maybe, but it can do like a RAID striping where each OpenRiak box does not need to have the entire database. It could just have a chunk of the database.
Exactly. That's a very good analogy to how it does it. It does split it a bit like RAIDs. As I said, there are 3 copies of your data, but you can guarantee, well, the default setting is 3. You can guarantee those will be stored on unique nodes. So if one node goes down, you still have 2 copies that are valid in the background that will
Mm,
run on the other 2 nodes.
interesting. Oh, that's very cool. I never thought about doing that in the database era. Obviously, we do it with hard drives all the time in RAID, when you think about that sort of thing there. But that's pretty cool to be able to do it. And then I suppose that you can sort of optimize that and make sure that every data center has an entire copy of the data, right? And
Yep,
so,
that's the exact point of the multi-data center replication. You
mm,
have one complete copy in each location.
so
Unless, and this is a nice one of the later version of replication in OpenRiak, in that you can also tune your data. So you can say, I want to replicate this to here, but that to there. So to put that in a more logical context for your listeners,
mm,
let's say that you have a data center in Europe, and Europe has these strict compliance rules such as GDPR, which means you can send anonymized data about your customers to the US, but you can't send your customers direct personal information to the US because
mm,
it's not within Europe. So you can within OpenRiak, you can specify that okay, this bucket is GDPR only, therefore the data cannot leave Europe. So it's ignored from the sync queue that goes to the US, but these buckets are perfectly okay to sync internationally, which means they have their data synced to the US. And of course, if the US has no issues with the same data, the US can sync all their data to Europe, but Europe can only then sync the ones that do not break GDPR compliance back to the US, which essentially gives you 2 copies of your data everywhere, but also covers all the compliance laws at the same time.
very cool, very cool. So what does an OpenRiak server look like? Are we? Would you recommend someone put Raspberry Pis in data centers?
Um, if you if you're looking for an economy one from the hardware you got lying around, then as a starting project, it does work, but it doesn't support many concurrent users very well. I will say that. If it's for a personal one, or family or a small group of people, yeah, okay, it'll probably work. But yes, it will start from anything as small as a Raspberry Pi. I've even had it work on a Raspberry Pi Zero as a test, but definitely do not do that in production.
Mm.
Um, and you can run it on basically anything. It runs on both x86 64 and ARM chipsets. You can run it on bare metal. You can run it in VMs. You can run it in the cloud. Stick it wherever you want. And yeah, scale as well. You can do tiny boxes up to such ridiculously huge boxes it costs you an arm and a leg to run it.
Can you mix and match? Is there a problem with um, having it on a big metal server and replicating it to a Raspberry Pi? I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but.
Yes, that is a bit of an extreme example. replicating it to a Raspberry Pi, if it's a smaller amount of data, it should just work. If it's a huge amount of data, there's a good chance the Raspberry Pi will fall over. But that's more about hardware limitations rather than the limitations of the software.
Yes,
Um,
you get to a point where you burn your Raspberry Pi. You left it in the oven too long.
yes, yes, exactly. When I did it first time, I didn't have proper cooling and actually accidentally burnt out some of the USB connectors that I was using connect to my external hard disks.
Fun.
Whoops.
Yes, yes, I can believe it. All right. So what is the actual deployment like? You go to do the install of OpenRiak. Say I want to play with it on a desktop or Raspberry Pi, what have you. What does that process look like to get the database spun up for the first time?
All right. If you're doing a single node install, which is great for development work, basically you go to go to where we keep the binaries online for the community, download the binary for your operating system, install it from the command line, which most people may be familiar with these days.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if you're using something like Docker, it will also install into any Linux, well, a supported Linux Docker instance, all the standard ones, Ubuntu, Red Hat clones, etc. Debian, it will install into those. Basically, you install the package and then execute start. Yeah, run React start and you're up and running. There's a whole bunch of tuning you'll want to do to play with things later, but essentially the quick and dirty way is install, run the start command, and you're done.
Hmm.
So it'll be a dpackage install for an RPM, or what is it these days? DNF
DNF and Fedora,
for
yeah.
RPM. Yeah.
So I just did a DNF info. There is an Erlang -Riak underscore. That one's PB, but let's look at core. It is the 3.0.16 version, but it points at github.com/basho/Riak core. Is that still you? Is that you guys, or is that still the old version that this is pointed at?
Oh right. Yeah, that if you're looking through the repos for your OS, that will be pointing at various things that are still old and public. React Core was actually a fast React Core or React Core Lite, sorry.
Yeah. So are you guys working like actively on trying to get OpenRiak to replace some of these old packages in Fedora and Apache, or Fedora and Ubuntu and all of those distros?
So what we do is instead, my company provides a hosting place for community provided binaries.
Okay.
And there's a dedicated website link, which hopefully we can share at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'll mention it quickly. It's
Yeah, absolutely.
files.tiot.jp/Riak.
Got it. That is the place to go to. Um, I always find it interesting when we're interviewing an open source project or talking to somebody. It's like Fedora is kind of my gold standard. Like, is the thing in Fedora that is oftentimes telling, and it is. It's here, just a very out of date version. So that is good to know.
Yes. 3016, would that be 2 years ago? That's a while ago. I can check that for you, but yeah.
Probably don't run that one. Don't run that one in production. It probably doesn't have any security updates.
It does still run in production, but yeah, generally with OpenRiak, as this is the database that hides at the back of everything, yeah, generally hide it behind firewalls and all the security you have. We try to keep it as secure as possible, but lots of people have it set it up once and it runs forever. So we occasionally get calls from people of, yeah, we've been having React running quite happily for 10 years, and we check and yeah, that's the 2015 version. That's a wee bit old now, but it's still in production because it just kept running
Just
and
works.
nobody thought, what do we need to do? It just works.
Yeah, that's fair. Have there
The nice thing is for people upgrading, the API is still the same, so their application can talk to the old version or the new version, and it just still works.
Mm-hmm. Have there been any interesting security stories in Riak or OpenRiak over the years? Like any really bad bugs that had to get fixed, or?
Well, bugs, yes. Security, nothing gapingly huge. One of the most famous bugs actually happened in Apple. Oh, 1 second. So Apple used to run so not OpenRiak, sadly. Apple used to run Riak for iMessages,
Right.
and that was in the early days where things were growing. And as Apple had a lot of stuff going around, and they had to add new nodes and lots of things were going on. The nodes in OpenRiak, they talk to, sorry, the nodes in Riak as it was then, OpenRiak now, they talk to each other. They have something called a gossip protocol, so they know that, oh, these nodes are up, and if some nodes are down, which does happen, they might be down due to technical failures, a bug, or more likely they'll be down for maintenance purposes
Mhm.
or even hardware failure, whatever. Anyway, so OpenRiak will continue running even with a couple of nodes down, and the rest will just spin up virtual nodes to make up for the missing ones, and everything will continue working. And they know what's up and what's down by talking to each other with what's known as the gossip protocol. But the problem is that in Apple's usage, for some reason, that it grew really quickly, and the gossip got faster and faster and more and more and more until it discovered this unique bug called a gossip storm. And that meant that the nodes were so busy telling each other about what's going on
Hmm.
that they didn't actually share the data with each other, which meant everything slowly ground to a halt. And iMessages actually went down for a short period as a result of this, which was rather embarrassing. I mean, on the plus side, that was an early, I think it was version 1.3 or 1.4 they were using at the time. And that's since been fixed many, many years ago
That's
and is no
great.
longer an issue anymore. I think that was fixed in version 2.0, if not earlier.
Hmm.
And we're now up to, well, technically 4 is theoretically released. I'm going to say that very theoretically released. Not we've not made publicly available packages for it yet, but the code is theoretically there.
So that's actually a great segue to ask you what is new in version 4. What's the headline feature there?
So version 4 is designed to remove a lot of the junk we've picked up over the years.
Mm.
Um, if we go back to Basho's days, one of the big things that was exciting about them is a new customer would come in and say, "We want to be able to do this, and it's amazing. Can you make something happen with it?" So people generally thought, "Yeah, well, okay, as you're giving us a shed load of money, we'll make that feature for you."
Hmm.
And then the money ran out partway through, and okay, well, we've kind of half made this feature, and it's in the code base, but there's no more money, so we're not going to finish it. And that's it, really. An example of this was strong consistency, an experimental feature where instead of having eventual consistency, which is, the one that we have mainly in Riak, you could then switch that out, have strong consistency,
Hmm.
which would then limit your availability, which was a great idea. And it kind of worked, except when it entered a very specific race condition that would cause some of your data protection tools to actually go berserk and delete all your data completely.
Probably not good.
No,
Yeah.
which is why that's officially been discontinued. But some of the code for that was so deeply built into Riak, it was hard to remove. So it's just been sitting there as code that's not used, but is still there as it's just hard to pull out as other stuff passes through it on the way to somewhere else.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
version 4 will be the much lighter footprint as we've removed a lot of stuff like that. The old replication engine that doesn't work as well as the new one, that's being removed as well because the code is just old and nobody really loves it or actually knows what some of it does anymore.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
yes,
I think
looking
I
for it
think
to be much lighter and faster.
I think every project that's been around for a while needs one of those releases where someone goes in and just sort of makes the hard decisions that this was a bad idea to start with. It has to go. This never got finished and it probably never will. It has to go. It's eventually you get there to where you just need that. It's got to happen.
Yeah, I think it's a tech debt cleanup in some way to look at it. Although there are meant to be lots of new things coming up, one of the new exciting things we're looking at is one of the big reasons people complain they don't want to use OpenRiak is, well, we don't know how to use it, is a big claim we see.
Hmm.
And because it's not, well, I never find it hard to use, put to this place this data, read from this place, thank you, data. How is this hard? I don't know. But apparently, some people find it hard to write queries like that. So, what we're also doing is we're looking to add DynamoDB style search filters.
Hmm.
So, people who can then just essentially come in from Dynamo and say, oh, yeah, I can kind of get this. They can then learn how to do the other bits and bobs that they're missing, but it gives them the angle of familiarity rather than the I have no idea what's going on here. I'm going to run screaming for the hills, which is what we tend to see.
I tried to do a select all, and it told me to get out of here. I don't know what to do now. Yes,
Exactly.
I very much understand that. The process of getting used to the new thing that you're trying to use. It takes some time every once in a while.
Mhm.
Is that sort of the most common problem that you see people run into? Is just it's different. I don't know what to do. Are there some other pitfalls that you found?
Um, Other pitfalls you tend to see is a lack of sufficient planning on how to do stuff. As I said earlier, OpenRiak is really, really fast and super efficient if you save your data exactly how you plan to query it,
Hmm.
which involves a bit of extra thought. Whereas some people just stick things in at random and then realize that to get their data back, they have to search this, to search that, to search that, to search that, to finally work out which one they need,
Mm-hmm.
which is suddenly not really very efficient at all. Or they'll end up I mean, OpenRiak supports, for example, secondary indexes, which are kind of handy, but again, you need to plan your indexes so your data is indexed before you query it. So find me everything that happened between, I don't know, May and October 2025. We can do that in OpenRiak. That's easy to do. But if people forgot to put the index in, or they only indexed by year and not by month and year, then that's not going to work.
Suddenly very difficult to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. Plan to save your data, how you're going to query it. If you do that, it's great. If you don't do that, you're going to run into issues later.
Yeah. I'm imagining some very odd situations where, and I'm sure somebody has done this, where you have like one database program just to hold the schema for your OpenRiak data. So like you've got to do a MariaDB lookup, and then that's going to give you some ID that you can then do an OpenRiak lookup based off of. I'm sure somebody has done something that hokey somewhere. I don't know if you
Oh,
guys have gotten to see it, but
that's actually a fascinating one. So in the old days of Riak, we used to have something called Yokozuna or Riak Search, which was essentially Apache Solr. And that had scaling issues because the Erlang virtual machine kind of likes memory, and the Java virtual machine required for
also kind
Solr,
of
all
likes
that
memory.
loves
Yes.
memory. Yes, that's a huge memory fan. So they would fight each other on a regular basis.
Ah.
And once people got above a big enough size, what we actually recommended they do is index their data in Solr on a separate box and then
Huh.
store it in Riak rather than using the built-in version of Solr in Riak.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
they'd query in Solr, which would give them a nice fast query, and then pull the data from Riak, which allows them to have a huge data store behind it. And fascinatingly enough, people have started recreating that recently with OpenSearch now, which means you then get the full power of OpenSearch. And to be fair, OpenSearch does scale pretty well, but it doesn't scale quite as well as OpenRiak.
Mm.
So you get an even bigger back end for OpenSearch without the data overhead because OpenRiak's holding that, and it just talks to OpenRiak through the I forgot the word for it. Not the replication engine. It's not the reconstitution engine. It's the reconciliation engine. There we go. Yes, it talks through OpenRiak through the reconciliation engine, and then that gives you the best of both worlds. So you've got this awesome free text search, which before was never something you could do well in Riak or OpenRiak. And then you've got this incredibly scalable back end, which then gives OpenSearch the power to grow even more than they can normally. So as far as I can see, that's a win-win thing. So
That's
exactly, yeah, exactly what you said. Yeah, people are doing this, and it's kind of exciting, really.
that's great. That's great. I thought that was going to be a horror story. Some that's quite fun. Um, is there anything that happened that Riak did that you've when you did the rebrand, when you did the open source, that you looked at and went, "We're not going to do that again. I want to avoid that."
Um, what are we looking to remove? Well, we're looking to remove dependencies on code outside the Erlang VM. To
Mm.
get React to work in the early days, there was a mixture of using external stuff and internal stuff, which makes it slightly harder to manage. So
Mhm.
an example of this is LevelDB, which is a database used within OpenRiak to help store and manage data. And
Hmm.
that was essentially external but controlled from Riak. Whereas we then a very, very competent member of the community essentially rewrote that as level ed, which is essentially the full Erlang implementation of the same thing, which meant that it's then managed within the Erlang VM itself and helps React run much more smoothly because you're then only running within a predefined environment
Hmm.
rather than having to go from the Erlang VM back to the main OS and then come back in again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, essentially by removing as much stuff that's not contained within the Erlang VM, we're seeing performance improvements both in speed, efficiency, and again, the throughput itself, not to mention the ease of management.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's where we're going. So yeah, remove code that's not related to that. Um, what else are we trying to avoid?
And sort of a parallel question: is there anything coming down the pike that you're super excited about with the project? What are you looking forward to?
Oh, things we're looking forward to. As OpenRiak is becoming more popular, there have been a lot of people who started to talk to us. So open search integrations, which seem to be on the horizon.
Hmm.
I'm very excited about those because that gives us the wonderful thing we talked about earlier. Valkey, for people who may know it better as Redis.
Hmm.
There used to be a React Redis plugin, and we've been in conversation with the people from Valkey recently, and they're very excited to. Oh, sorry, Valkey is essentially the open source version of Redis when Redis decided they'd become closed sourced and annoy people.
Yes.
Yes, Valkey is looking to do a update of the old plugin,
Hmm.
as that's all open source. So we'll work with them to then have an OpenKey Valkey plugin, which essentially allows you to plug React, OpenRiak into things such as Databricks, as that basically works with Redis.
Yeah, very cool.
Um, so yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
What else do we have coming up? There's some pretty exciting stuff to do with authentication, which is a fork from React CS or OpenRiak CS, but I'm not allowed to talk for much about that in detail at the moment, so we're not sure if that's going fully open source or not at this point in time. So
Sure.
just there's exciting stuff coming. I can't discuss all of it, but I'm privy to quite a lot more than I'm allowed to say.
Understood. I know how that goes. I do. I've got to ask one of the questions I like to ask folks. What's the weirdest deployment? What's the weirdest use case that you heard of somebody using Riak or OpenRiak for? What's the one that really surprised you, or is just really oddball?
That's a good question. I've seen.
Most,
Hmm.
particularly projects that's been around for a while. You ask this question, and like half the time, somebody, it's like, I've seen things, man. I've seen crazy things you wouldn't believe.
Yes, I'm trying to think which examples. Sometimes, it depends on how you want to look at it. So sometimes you see, actually, that's probably the weirdest one I've ever seen. This is one where we were essentially parachuted into. A potential customer approached us online saying, we've been running uh, OpenRiak for a while and we're running into these issues. Okay, well, you're running into issues, fair enough. And those issues don't sound like they're caused by OpenRiak, but they're only on the OpenRiak boxes. That's just weird. So we dug into it. And as I was going through, I noticed there was a reference in the logs to a folder that shouldn't be there. So I emailed them and said, what's this folder? Can you give me a copy? And the CTO resigned.
Oh, really? That
Yes.
I'm sure there's more to that story that maybe you're not allowed to tell us, or
Um, so Oh, that's actually something we're removing going. Well, no, I'm not actually removing that as far as I know. OpenRiak has pre and post committal hooks, which means that you can actually specify an action to trigger when you write or when you write something either before the write fit happens or just after the write happens. And what the CTO had done, as far as I can tell, is that the application layer guys weren't writing data in the right format to store in the database based on how they wanted to store stuff. So he'd written these pre and post commit hooks to intercept the write, perform a whole bunch of functions on it to
Oh,
determine what kind of data it actually was, and then reissue the write to write it in the right place within the database, which on one side was actually really clever, but on the other side was causing horrendous slowdown in Riak,
yes.
which was then causing it say, well, oh, my write failed, I must write it again.
Yep. It's brilliant and horrifying at the same time.
So that was both brilliant and horrifying. That was a really weird usage that I've never seen of we're going to build an application within your database that then talks to the application, intercepts the application layer, and then fixes what's wrong on the application side. That has to be the strangest use case I've ever seen.
Yeah. What about doing things like putting files or binary data inside of OpenRiak?
That's quite common. So we've seen it used for things such as a file store. I mean, if you use the plugin tool for it called OpenRiak CS, then essentially it will convert OpenRiak KV into an S3 interface.
Oh.
So you can then essentially use it as you'd use Amazon S3, as we've
Hmm.
got almost all the functions that S3 does except for triggers. Um, I've seen people use it as an online photo store. We've
Hmm.
seen it used for backups. So, every single department within a huge company would then take their nightly backups, four or five
Hmm.
hundred gig tar files a piece, and just dump it into React CS at night, which will then chunk it out into the different small parts and store it in OpenRiak.
I was actually just thinking about that when you said the file system thing, the S3. It's like, oh, I've used S3 for backup. I wonder if someone could spin their own backup infrastructure with that. That sounds like
Oh yeah,
that
that's
would be kind of fun,
definitely a
actually.
thing. There's that. I've also seen it for people doing video streaming.
Re-
As OpenReact CS works by chunking the files in the background, it pulls up each chunk one at a time and reassembles your video file on the fly as you stream it back to your end user. So, Netflix, here we come, but possibly not quite the same level. I don't know. I'm not sure what they use now.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of a cursed use case, but makes sense at the same time. Somebody
Yes,
actually
you'll
deploying.
eventually run into bandwidth and throughput issues. But it's
Yeah.
nice in that you can have for the S3 stuff, you can also specify a deletion window. So you're not allowed to access it after this specific point in time, but any downloads that are running can be set to, you know, your download is still available if you've already started it for the next 8 hours or the next day or something,
Hmm. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a nice, cut-off window. You can no longer download it if you haven't started yet, but if you're running, we'll give you a bit of time to finish off.
That's cool. Some neat ideas. All right. We are actually getting fairly close to back to the bottom of the hour. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that I didn't ask you about that we really should that people should know about?
Um,
I know this is a hard question. You got to
things.
do set math in your head. What did we talk about? What did I want to talk about?
Yes, I'm trying to remember as much as we talked about. Okay, so I'll try and cut through to a few things that are reasonably new and I don't think we covered.
Mhm.
So exciting things happening from more recent versions of OpenRiak. We now have a auction for tasks coming in,
Hmm.
and the purpose of that is that up until now, if you had nodes go offline, then the resources used would slowly pile up on the remaining nodes as they did the work for the node that was offline. And we could eventually result in what was called a cascading failure,
Hmm.
where you push the resource usage too high and things couldn't keep up, and the whole thing could fall over. That was very rare and would take some incredibly bad luck or bad planning to encounter, but it was a thing. So that's now been fixed because lots of people are moving to cloud, and in cloud you like to get the maximum bang for your buck. So instead of recommending your boxes only use 60% CPU to make up for times when things are offline, on cloud you want to try and use 100% CPU and 100% memory all the time to get the maximum amount from your spending. And we've rejigged the code for that so that if you're running like this on all your boxes on the cloud, well, actually, it will work on bare metal now as well. If one of your nodes goes offline, then it doesn't cause a cascading failure, despite the fact you have no free resources to take over the extra work. Instead, it just slows down your cluster a tiny bit.
Hmm.
So that means that you now get much better cache throughput if you're running OpenRiak in the cloud. And it also gives you much better resilience to faults happening, even if you're in a busy cluster running on bare metal or VMs on your own hardware.
Very cool. That
Um,
that brings
well,
to mind a question. Then we can get back to this about what we haven't talked about. Does OpenRiak, one of these clusters, do they sort of elect a leader? Is there one of these nodes that sort of gets elected as the master node, the controller, or
oh, right.
does everything sort of happen in a democracy? We'll say.
Yes, essentially, OpenRiak acts as though it's a master list system. There is an official cluster manager node that's elected, but if that node goes offline, the other nodes will say, "Oh, cluster manager's offline. Okay, I'll be the next cluster manager," and it just goes around and
Hmm.
it contains. So if you take out the node, have you beheaded the entire cluster? No, the cluster doesn't care. It just pops up a new one and continues as if nothing happened.
It is Hydra.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Very cool. And then you were contemplating the next thing that we hadn't talked about.
Yes, we've done a lot of work on efficiency and performance to make sure things keep running even in the worst possible situations. I mean, to give you an example of resiliency of OpenRiak, there's one system running I'm aware of that's achieved 100% uptime for over 10 years. And of course, within that time, hardware failures did happen, but
Hmm.
because the OpenRiak just continued running with one or two nodes down, then that's a great way to save costs. Lots of the older databases or the bigger pay to use databases will require you to have if you're running on bare metal, they require you to have a team of people available 24/7 to run into your data center, rip out the smoldering remains of your server, stick in a new one, fully configure it, plug it in, and be ready to go. And during that period, you've suffered 15 minutes of downtime, which hopefully nobody noticed if it was the middle of the night, which is a huge drain on cost and resources. Whereas in OpenRiak, it's a case of, oh, server's gone offline. Fair enough. I'm going there next Tuesday. I'll go and fix it then because OpenRiak just doesn't care. If you really want to be very good on your administrative keeping, you send a small message to OpenRiak itself and says, by the way, can you mark that node as down, please? And that's it.
That's pretty great. I like that. I like the idea of not having to stress out over a server going down. That
Yes.
sounds pretty glorious.
If you plan properly, a single server going down, you don't care. And that's an absolute dream rather than getting panic phone calls. I'm about to leave for holiday with my kids. What do you mean I need to go to the data center now?
Yes, I have been on both sides of those sorts of phone calls throughout my career. Yes. Uh, all right. So, if somebody wants to learn more about OpenRiak, where should they go?
Right. That's an interesting one, as due to the comparatively recent rebranding and the fact that most of us are absolutely terrible at marketing, we're very slow on getting things up and running. So we do have websites. Let's see. We have openreact.org, which is still pretty much a shell, but we're working on making it more exciting.
Mhm.
Um, there's GitHub/OpenRiak if you want to check out the source code, look at some of the discussions that are posted there. There's the OpenRiak LinkedIn group where you get slightly more human-friendly code because I try and write it to appeal to more generic people.
Mhm.
There's a Slack group called Post Riak, as after the original Riak folded, we hadn't got a new name and we called it Post Riak and haven't changed it, even though we're officially Open Riak now. What else is there? There are
Discord?
the binaries.
Mhm.
Discourse? I don't think we have a discourse. No,
Discourse or Discord?
sorry. No, I don't think we have that either, I'm afraid. There was a brief one, but it folded early on as that
Mhm.
was 2017-ish and not enough people were interested at the point in time.
Sure.
It was mostly ex-Basho employees back then. I was a member of that now I think about it. Um, what else do we have? Yeah, other than that, check out the documentation online. There's a new thing that's been released recently called Quick Docs, which is meant to be a quick way to get up and running under specific settings in OpenRiak if you're a competent systems administrator. Whereas if you're a complete newbie, you're a developer who thinks, I'm going to try developing something on OpenRiak, that may not be the tool for you.
Sure. So what about meetups? Is there a OpenRiak Con? Is there something coming where you OpenRiak hackers are getting together in person?
Yeah, we're quite excited about that. We're looking at moving to something within more conferences rather than just the odd talk in the near future. But for the moment, I'm most excited about the first ever Tokyo-based OpenRiak meetup, which is happening next month. Check it
Oh,
out on meetup.com.
oh, very cool. Yeah, well, I will not make it. That is literally around the world from me, but that it's very
That'd be
cool.
great if you
I'll maybe one of these days. I'm actually going to I'm going to Germany here in March. It'll be the
could.
furthest afield that I'm going, and that is for Embedded World. And they're finally putting me on the conference schedule for some of those things. So maybe at some point in the future, flying to Japan might be in my wheelhouse, but not quite yet. That's a bit far still, but that's
Well,
fun though.
definitely, if you fancy doing a live show from a new location, we'd be more than happy to accommodate you.
Live from the field. That's fun.
Exactly.
All right. And then I've got to ask you a pair of final questions. I get emails if I forget to do this. And so, you personally, what is your favorite text editor and scripting language?
Oh, right. Editors, they really come and go for me. Um,
You mean you haven't been using Emacs since 1985?
most of my stuff I actually spend is writing dirty scripts in Bash to try and, or even just Shell to fix people's problems.
Hmm.
So probably I use Nano, and if Nano's not available, I use V, which is probably rather embarrassing. But bear in mind that the first production system I wrote the entire source code in Notepad, which didn't have line numbering back then. So that was
I
great. You look in
understand.
the comments of my coders. I think this is line 180 or something.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And then, so your scripting language of choice would be Bash code, you think?
Recently, I do a lot more in Bash and Shell. Previously, I did a lot in PHP just because that's what I needed to do for my last three previous jobs before joining this company.
Hmm.
But I'll generally try my finger at most things. Bizarrely enough, despite my long history of working in Riak and OpenRiak, I can read Erlang code, but I can barely write it at all. So there you go. For people who think I must learn Erlang to use OpenRiak, no, you don't. People who've been in the environment for a very long time don't know it.
That's
Not all
true.
of them, though. Some of them are complete geniuses, and I have much respect for them.
That's fun. That's fun. All right, Nicholas Adams, thank you, sir, for coming to join us. It's been a blast. The hour has flown by, and really enjoyed getting to learn about you and about OpenRiak and the story there. So, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoyed that a lot. You're right. That went really quickly.
Yep, absolutely. All
I enjoyed
right.
that. Thank you.
Yep. So that was the show, and I am very tempted to go and spin up an OpenRiak install. That idea of my own S3 instance on a couple of servers is very tempting. So we'll see if that happens. We've actually got one more week where we don't have a guest yet. So if you know someone that we ought to talk to for the recording on the 27th, let me know and we'll get them scheduled. And then we've got Olaf, Andreas Schult, and Lars Kiesau for OpenCast on February the 3rd. Looking forward to that. We do appreciate Hackaday being the home of the show. And if you want to follow more of my work, there is the Untitled Linux Show still over at twit.tv/ULS. We would love to see you there. Other than that, just want to say thank you to everybody, whether you watch or listen live or on the download, and we will see you next week on Floss Weekly.